This is a game about digging a hole. No, seriously, that's the actual title. It's a pretty simple mining game where the player must collect many different resources in order to upgrade their tools and dig deeper, creating a pretty fun and rewarding gameplay cycle. The game came out to the public in early February of 2025, and quickly blew up in popularity due to its minimalist style and relatively cheap price. And among the many people who were interested in giving it a shot, there was the speedrunning community. Though, what exactly was there to speedrun? I mean, sure, there's a lot of simulation games out there with impressive runs that require insane strats to be executed, but most of them come from titles that are way bigger in size and have countless mechanics that could be exploited. All you could really do here was walk, dig, and fly upwards with a jetpack. There really wasn't much to do in a way to beat the game any faster, right? Well, let's just say that this game's strats blew everyone away, because all it really took for the game to go from a dig down as fast as possible speedrun all the way to an out of bounds mess that could be beaten in the blink of an eye was 24 hours. But wait, just before we get things started, it's probably best if I give a quick rundown of how the game even works. And even though most of the mechanics I will talk about have already been bypassed in the current any percent run, it's probably a good idea if I give you some quick context on how it plays out. So, let's dig in. Upon starting a new game, the player gets thrown into a cutscene, which shows the main character arriving at a newly bought house. And like any sane human being, the first thing they do is start digging in their backyard. Once you start off, you won't really have much to go out of, and you can only make money by digging out materials like rocks and iron, which can be used to upgrade your shovel's quality, which allows you to dig bigger holes, your inventory size, which allows you to store more minerals, your battery life, that lets you stay inside caves for a longer period of time, and also your jetpack strength. Why do we have a jetpack in the first place? Just don't ask. You can also heal yourself in case you suffer from fall damage, as well as buying some items like dynamite and lamps, which become increasingly more useful as you dig into darker caves and find bigger minerals that can't be destroyed without explosives. After enough digging, you'll find yourself in the middle of a dungeon? Okay. Inside of this dungeon, you'll find a few giant moles that you must run away from, and if you follow the right path, you'll find yourself in a giant room with a single treasure chest at the end of it. Attempt to open it and the game ends, with there being absolutely nothing inside of the chest, and you immediately getting killed by the moles. Truly an intricate gaming experience. Now, I know the game might sound a bit random at first, but its sheer simplicity ends up making it really fun to beat in 100%. It reminds me a lot of stuff like Motherload, having a very similar gimmick to the old Flash game. Well, except for the fact that you don't end up fighting Satan in this one, but that's besides the point. While the game was relatively short, taking about an hour to beat normally, there weren't any known time saves that could make this an interesting speedrun to try out. But all of that would rapidly change on February 9th, where the Where the AGADAH speedrun Discord server would officially open to the public, and what happened next is history. Upon the first day of the speedrun server being created, a lot of runners began trying to find the most optimal route in order to finish the game as fast as possible. But surprisingly enough, nothing major was found within that time span, as things would only escalate by February 10th. Still though, a few optimizations were made when it came to shaping up the current route. Firstly, runners found out that the ideal way to dig the hole would be to pick a spot in the backyard and start making a spiral-like movement facing downwards. This would simplify the resource gathering process a lot, allowing the player to use most of their battery collecting minerals, and then using the jetpack to fly back up in a matter of seconds. Another important time save came in the form of optimizing how your money should be spent. Players found out that the best way to make use of your income in speedruns would be to get the final shovel upgrade, aka the drill, as early into the run as possible, as this tool allows you to dig down at ridiculously fast speeds, letting you reach the dungeon in a matter of minutes. And that was pretty much it for new strats that day, which unfortunately meant that most of the run would still come down to who had the best RNG, as everything ranging from materials, obstacles, and even the enemy's routing was completely luck dependent, making for a pretty tame speedrun. The first run that was uploaded onto the servers was a 16-minute 12-second speedrun by Luciano V3, utilizing most of the small time saves that had been previously mentioned. Within the next few hours, the record was lowered bit by bit until a runner named Ozilier took the number 1 spot with a final time of 11 minutes and 53 seconds, the game's first ever sub 12. But within the next few hours, a sub 12 time wouldn't even come close to being on a good pace, because nobody could have ever predicted how crazy the game's runs were going to become just a day later. The date was February 10th, and most runners were occupied with trying to optimize the RNG mess that was any percent, since there were no major time saves that could be taken advantage of at the time. One of these runners was a player by the name of Love Grammy. Love Grammy started her run as usual. She dug into the ground a couple times, grabbed a few resources, and made her way to the computer terminal as to sell them for money. But after pressing the interact key a second time, something strange happened. The money had been duplicated out of thin air, and this wasn't just a one-time thing. Every single time she interacted with that computer, the money would keep on stacking. Love Grammy immediately showed her findings to the server, and the community went wild over it. All that speedrunners had to do now was find a single material, then head to the computer and repeatedly spam the E key in order to get as much money as possible. Then you would just have to max out the shovel upgrades, buy some extra dynamite as a safety measure, and start digging down. Players immediately began to adapt this strategy into runs, and within a matter of minutes, the record was lowered down from a sub 12 all the way to a whopping sub 5. First achieved by a runner named Sampa. Sampa then proceeded to beat their run record time and time again until they reached a 3-minute 59-second run, completing the entire game within 4 minutes. Needless to say, the money duping glitch was the saving grace of this game's speedrunning, allowing the total runtime to be cut off by almost 65% with a few key presses, and this was only just the beginning. A few hours before the duping revolution occurred, a runner by the name of Kiddo managed to activate the game's internal console, which allowed a variety of commands to be executed, such as showing hitboxes, being able to fly around the map, and even going out of bounds. Oh, and speaking of that, Kiddo realized that the dungeon's layout actually allowed you to reach the final chest even if you weren't inside the tunnels that lead to it, as the hitboxes for the ground were slightly extended past the tunnel's walls, allowing the player to beat the game while outside of the game's boundaries. And sure, it was a pretty cool revelation, except for the fact that it was pretty much useless at the time, since there was no way to clip out of bounds in the first place. But all it took was a few minutes of testing until Kiddo found this. Yep, out of bounds was officially doable in runs, and it's all thanks to a seemingly innocent item, the lantern. You see, lanterns have a pretty interesting quirk in comparison to any other item. If you were to attach one of these to any object in the game and then interact with it, the hitbox of said object would just cease to exist, allowing players to delete whole sections of the map with the press of a button. Shortly after this skip's discovery, speedrunners created an ideal route to reach the ending as fast as possible, and if you thought the sub 4 time that came with duping was already insane by itself, you might want to sit down for this next part. The first proposed route involved the player spamming lanterns in the left wall of the garden in a way to clip out the backyard, and then falling down into the dungeon below. But just a few minutes later, runners found out that you could achieve an even faster time by doing the same clip on the backyard's front wall, saving almost half a minute compared to the previous time. But even that wasn't enough, as an even faster strat ended up being developed, with this one having you quite literally just delete the whole ass map. No, I'm not joking. You could just place down a lamp, then immediately pressing the ground and it would cause this. How this even got past playtesting is just beyond me. It goes without saying that it took almost no time until speedrunners demolished the previous record, with Sampa improving his sub 4 run into a 2:07, and then having the record taken away by another skilled runner by the name of Softy, who managed to perform a 1 minute 9 second run. Yup, 69 seconds was all it took to beat the game now. But Softy wasn't even done, as a few hours later, they managed to chip away the time and optimize it into a 58.92 second run, achieving the first ever sub 1 minute speedrun in the game's history. And this wasn't just skill, as the run's RNG was perfected to the point where Softy managed to obtain 2 stones within his first 2 digs, which equals to about a 1 in 3,000 chance of happening. This sheer luck paired with the near perfect movement across the dungeon earned him one of the greatest runs to have been performed in this game so far. And with that in mind, this was how speedrunners destroy the game in under 24 hours. A game about digging a hole is not something I've ever imagined myself making a video about, but watching the speedrunning community completely dissect the game in a matter of hours was just mind-blowing. And don't get me wrong, I'm always fascinated by how people manage to find crazy skips in any run in general, but most of said skips end up taking weeks, if not months, to be fully developed. Regardless, I'm just glad that players managed to develop an interesting speedrun out of such a simplistic experience. I'm not sure on if the record has been lowered by the time this video is out, but I highly doubt it. Side note, it already has. It's currently a 51 second run by Okia, which uses a different clip directly under the garage floor, and then going back in bounds at the very end. But being able to perfect a route this early on is both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, you've already found a powerful strategy, but unfortunately, that means that there's barely any room for improvement, meaning that most records will come down to being literal milliseconds apart. Thankfully, speedrunners have also been attempting different categories other than out of bounds, like the any percent glitchless, and even the 100% category, which at the moment still takes over half an hour to finish. So don't worry about the game dying out so soon. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I wanted to give a quick thanks to Kiddo, who helped me out with gathering background footage, as well as giving me context on most of the strats used. This video would not have come out as fast as it did if it weren't for him. I also wanted to shout out Luciano, Ozzy, Sampa, and Softy for allowing me to use their runs in the video. And lastly, thank you so much for watching if you've made it to the very end. Then again, shorter videos aren't really my type of content, so I'm sorry if this seemed a bit odd in comparison to other stuff I usually make. I wanted to try something new this time. I do have another long form project that I'm currently working on, which will hopefully come out within the next 2 or so months. But anyways, thanks again for watching, and until next time, see ya!